Let's create this hole in the floor in Blender. This time we got a long tutorial, but actually all this process can be done in 20 minutes or something. The fact that this tutorial is long is just because while I'm doing the things, I'm explaining to you what I'm doing, which requires double the time. So for doing this tutorial we need an addon, see the link in the description, that is not free but actually costs nothing. For just $20 you get something that feels like having a small Udemy into your Blender. Anyway, this became my favorite addon ever, and it saves years of work if you are into simulation and physics stuff with Blender. I'm sorry for all these crickets sounding on the background, but they want to scream today. Well, the first thing you have to do is to purchase the addon from the link that I leave you in the description, and once you purchase, you download it and then go on Edit, Preferences. Make sure that you don't unzip the file that you have downloaded. You don't have to unzip it. You just import it like that. Go on Add-ons, click on Install. I already have it installed in my Blender, but I want to show you how to do this. That is the addon, and click on Install Addon and save preferences. You can close this, and now you should see here this side panel. If you don't see this side panel, you press N, right? If you have done everything correctly till now, you should see this panel that shows the addon with a bunch of functions to destroy everything you want. So the first thing I'm gonna do is to go on here, this plus button, and opening the VFX menu, motion tracking. Let's expand this a bit. Click on Open and search for your image sequence. I suggest to you to don't use video format files, because they create a lot of problems. Sometimes these images are not in the right order. If you want to make an order here, you just click on Name here, maybe twice. From 0, you click on the one with the 0 and then press A, and then Open Clip. Okay. It's better if you go here in the Output Properties and you set your project with the frame rate of your video. In my case it's 25. Now we can click on Set Scene Frames and prefetch. It's loading the image sequence in the memory. Cool. Now simply switch this to perspective. The movement I did is so smooth. If you did this too, it will be very easy to do the motion tracking. So detect features, I'm in the frame 0 and I'm clicking on what is here, track markers. Done. Without clicking anything now, you click on detect features again, and then you click on track markers back, the arrow with the left one this time. Okay, let's see if this works like this. And I'm gonna click on solve camera motion and see what happens. 0.93. If we can do better. So to delete the trackers with errors, we just go on cleanup and we set a maximum allowed error of 0.01 and fill the tracks. And then press with the mouse here, press X and delete tracks. Cool. And now we're gonna solve the camera again and see the result. 0.78 is perfect to me. Cool. Just save the project, safety first. Cool. Now our video is tracked and you see the markers that are following our movement. What we can do now is to set up the scene. So I'm gonna go down here, go down here, and we can choose this point maybe for being our origin. So I'm gonna click on Set Origin and I'm gonna select this point here maybe and set this as a X-axis. Cool. Let's see if it works. We're gonna click on Set as a background and set up tracking scene. As you can see now, our scene here is following the camera. Now let's get back into the layout here and fix everything better. I'm gonna set this view on the camera. I'm gonna turn off everything here. And for our camera, I'm gonna make everything darker outside the camera views. So I'm gonna go here, viewport display, passepartout, and set to 1. Cool. Let's see what's going on here. We have some problems to fix. This looks like it's very messy, but we just need to say to Blender what and where is the floor. Just activate the motion tracking points here. Everything is rotating. You can try to rotate manually everything, but it's more easy to go with the automatic function. Let's go back in the motion tracking, opening our motion tracking windows, and we can say to Blender which is the floor. So we select 3 points like this, and we click on set as floor. Yes. Now we go back to the layout and see what's going on. I'm pressing Ctrl spacebar to go full screen, you see? Okay, let's go here. Just place the geometries wherever you want in the floor. Yes, this is following very good. Now we need to make some order in the Compositor, because every time you motion track a video, Blender automatically creates a lot of stuff that we don't need. So if you are in the foreground, you can click on the remove via layer, so that now we have only one view layer, that is the background, and that is the one that we want to work on. I'm going to switch this to Compositor, and there is a bunch of stuff that we don't really need, and it's useless, and I don't suggest to you to use them. All this stuff, let's delete them. I'm going to plug the render layers from the image to the image here. This is, make sure that this is set on background. Okay, and everything should be fine. Alright, let's get back to the 3D view. Make sure that we are on EV, because I want to work on EV for working fast. 64 is okay. Let's press F12, and you see nothing because we have to tweak a little bit of settings now. In the render properties here, we go down to the film panel and activate the transparent. Also, I suggest you to activate the overscan, so that we will have less problems in the borders that with EV can happen. Let's see, F12. Now we have transparency. Go to the camera, and in the camera setting, let's check everything. Background images. We can increase the opacity of the video to 100%. All right, let's give a check on this too. If something is turned on, yeah, we can turn off this indirect. We're gonna set this on render view. I can move it. If I press Shift Z, it will move only on the floor. What I'm gonna do is to choose a moment of the video in which we clearly see the floor that we want to break. So let's go on the wireframe mode, because we want to give a texture to this floor. And it must be the part in which the camera is very close to the texture that we want to break, so that it will be the highest quality possible. I think something like here, 2030. Okay. We can move this plane a little bit, so that you see that here is going. We need it to covering all the scene. Okay. I think it's better to rotate a bit this. Let's see. I'm gonna subdivide a few times just to see the perspective, how it's working. Yeah, we can rotate it a little bit, just so that this line is the one I'm interested on. So R, Z, and you rotate until this is aligned with this line. Okay. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Here is finishing the geometry. We want it to be covering everything. Move it like this. Align this part of the bench. So we can do S, Y, X, X, sorry. And also move it a little bit on the X axis, local. So basically here I modeled my floor trying to respect the geometry of the real video, but this is not a modeling tutorial, so we skip this part. So now what we got is this. Now let's see if the floor is always present in the scene here. Yeah, this is very cool. Now we want to make a hole in the ground. We can actually delete this default cube and select this ground that we're gonna call it floor. Enter in edit mode, alt click on these edges so that it selects all this line, and I press Ctrl B, something like this. Yeah, I want the hole to go something like from here to here. Let's see if it's good. Too big, too much geometry to calculate. It's better to have a smaller hole so that everything will be faster. So I select this face, Ctrl R, add in an edge here, go on face mode, select this and press P selection. That is gonna separate these faces and make it another mesh from here. Cool, this is the part that we are gonna break. So we've got the floor that we are gonna destroy. Click on the floor, on the big floor I mean, Ctrl A to apply scale. Applying the scale is a very important step to do before playing with physics. That is something that we are gonna do heavily later. And also is very important before doing the UV unwrap that we're about to do now. So now I'm gonna select the central floor. We're gonna rename it central floor. With the mouse here, Ctrl A and apply the scale. And also, if you see that the origin of this central floor is here, go on Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry, and now the origin switches here. Finally, we can create a material for the central floor, so I'm gonna go in the Material panel, creating a new material, and I'm gonna call it Central Floor. And I'm gonna switch this window to Shader Editor, expand this a bit. And now it's time to activate another add-on, that is the node Wrangler. If you search for Wrangler, make sure that this is active. So this must be checked, and save preferences, because now we're gonna use it. So we're gonna select this node here, pressing Ctrl T. We can select these two and delete them, and we can choose the texture now. So normally I would use the UV project to project the image sequence into this mesh, but in this case we cannot do it because this floor is gonna be destroyed in many parts. So today we're gonna use just one single frame of the image sequence, and now we're gonna choose which one is gonna be the best. If you scroll to the animation, we have to check a frame in which this central floor is almost completely in the frame. We cannot choose a part like this because some parts here are cut out of the frame. So we're gonna choose something like frame 30. Yeah, I'm gonna click on open. Pay attention because we cannot choose the frame 30 but 29, because our project starts from frame 1. Instead, our image sequence starts from 0. So the frame 29 coincides with frame 30 on the project. Okay, open image. You see nothing. We can switch to render view here. You see nothing here because we need to do the UV unwrapping. So I'm gonna press tab, pressing A, and then U, project from view. You see that now we have our ground projected. It's a little bit distorted because we need more geometry in our floor. So I'm gonna right click, subdivide, right click, subdivide again, and maybe another time. Yes, something like this. Okay, now we need to set this floor to be a shadow catcher. That in cycles, if you want to use cycles, is very easy to do because you just need to go on the object properties here. Under the visibility, you just activate the shadow catcher. Even if the geometry goes inside the floor, you can see the shadow projected into this floor. Let's make something more visible. Look at this. Instead, in Eevee, this doesn't work, and we need to do a little trick to create a shadow catcher. A shadow catcher on Eevee is possible creating a shader. I'm gonna call this shadow catcher. Let's expand this a bit. I'm gonna delete the principal. If you press Shift A and add in a diffuse shader, We basically want to say to Blender that in this mesh only the black parts are gonna be visible, instead all the other parts are gonna be transparent. And to do this, we're gonna make a mix shader, duplicate this, diffuse and set it on white. We're creating the factor that is gonna be set with a shader to RGB, this one. And we can control it with a color ramp. Let's see. Now here you don't see nothing because we need on EV, we need to go in the material properties and set the blend mode on alpha blend. If I move Suzanne, you can see that the shadows are projected into the ground. And now it's time to fix the fact that we also see the geometry under the floor. Because the shadow catcher on EV is a little bit different from Cycles. Cycles also hide everything from the view. Instead, EV just creates a semi-transparent mesh. So what I do is to apply a little trick, that is to select this big floor, duplicate pressing Shift D and then Z to move it on the Z axis and move it down just a little bit, like this. Let's see, very close to the shadow catcher, all right? Because this is gonna be a hold. We don't want this mesh to have any material. So I'm gonna go here and pressing on minus here and rename this here floor hold. Press M and move it to a new collection, and I'm gonna call this hold objects. Because now this collection is gonna be a hold. If you see this icon here, you activate it and see what happens. We got a perfect hiding object. If you don't see this icon activate from here, Susan is perfectly hidden by the floor and also has the shadow. Cool, let's check everything now. I'm gonna give a test render pressing F12 and see what happens. We don't see the background, maybe because there is something wrong in the compositor. I'm gonna check the compositor right now. Yeah, I deleted the wrong node in the beginning, so it's easily fixable by pressing Shift A and adding a movie clip. You can see it here. This is already our image sequence, and I'm gonna plug this image into the first image here, and we can even delete this one here. So now I'm gonna press F12 again, and this should be fine. Yes. Okay, now we have a clear vision of what's going on here. We need to fix this platform because it's not very well textured, and the reason is because we added some geometry after doing the UV unwrap. Select this central floor here and go into the frame 30 where we did the texturing. Go into edit mode with tab, pressing U, project from view. And you see that now the texture is fixed. If I press F12 again, it's aligned with the footage. All the lines are attached together. Now we can work on the color matching between the CGI and the movie. And also we noticed that the shadow catcher is casting too much shadow around here, everywhere. So what we need to do is just to play with the color ramp on the shadow catcher. Let's rename this floor, let's rename it EV shadow catcher. Ha! One less mosquito in the world. Let's have a clear vision of what's going on here. Click on this one and turn off some useless stuff, like for example extra, outline selected, like that. So with the floor, with the shadow catcher selected, if you play with the color ramp, you see that we can hide gray shades of the shadow. But you don't have to push it too much, otherwise you see that you will hide even the shadow. So just the necessary that you think it's okay. So I'm gonna keep it like this. Maybe we can now play a little bit with the light. So this light is gonna be switched to sun. Not too much powerful, please. Something like 5. I want to play with the light until this platform looks exactly like this movie. So I'm gonna decrease the power, and I see that it's too much shiny here. So I'm gonna select the central floor, and in the shader I'm gonna increase the roughness to 1, so that every shining part now is turned off. We can even rotate the sun a little bit, just to have more shadows, something like that. We can even increase the angle to have more blurred shadow, because I see that even in the original movie the shadows are very blurred, also almost invisible. So I'm gonna do this in my light, maybe put in something like 24, and let's make sure that you increase the quality of the shadow in EV settings here. Shadows 4000, high bit depth if you want. Now there is a little bit of visible difference between the platform and the movie, so just play with the lights a little bit more until they match perfectly. Yes, I'm happy with this. There is a weird line here between the CGI part and the movie. So what I'm gonna do is to select the EV shadow catcher and also the floor hold. You can press Ctrl on your keyboard to select two different objects. And I'm gonna move them up just of 1 pixel like this until this is hidden. That's okay to me. And we don't see this line anymore. We can even go in the light setting, so select the light. And in the setting we can activate the contact shadows. We can fix another thing. You see that there is a weird difference between the shadows that is here and the shadow that is here. This happened because maybe we cut too much the black part on the shadow catcher. So select the shadow catcher and just bring this cursor a little bit back on the right. Should be fine. Cool. I'm gonna leave it like that. Also, if you see these artifacts in the shadow, it's because you have just to increase the samples. I'm gonna put on 128. We're gonna increase the quality just before the final rendering. So we can delete this Susan. Okay, so now it's time to work on this part of the video and also on the whole. So for now, we can temporarily turn off the visibility of the shadow catcher and also turn off the visibility of the floor hold. And anyway, I'm gonna select my central floor. I want to see texture, please. And in edit mode, I'm gonna press A to select everything. Press N, and I'm gonna extrude this on the Z-axis. And we're gonna select these faces holding Alt on the keyboard, and left click on one of these faces will select all this ring of faces, and also select this Shift G to select similar normal, and we have selected all the faces but not the ones that are up here. What we're gonna do is to apply another material for this, because it's gonna be the internals. So I'm gonna go into the material tab, I'm gonna press plus, new, I'm gonna call this internal, and I'm gonna click on assign. Now we have two materials in the same object. So the first material is the floor, and the second is for the internals. Jump into the edit mode again, and you can unwrap this very easily. You don't have to worry much about it. Unwrap, and I'm gonna go to give a texture to this material that is something like rocks. So go in the shader with the internals selected, go into the shader, select the principal, press Ctrl T. We can delete this, and I'm gonna choose my rocks textures. Maybe this one, because it has a nice contrast and we can create interesting displacement with this one. Also we can apply some bumpiness, so I'm gonna plug this color into the normal. I'm gonna add a bump node and plug this into the height. Maybe decrease the strength to 0.3, also this on 0.3. We can even control this with a color ramp, and we can decide which part of this texture are gonna be bumpy. I want something like this for the small bumpy. For the big displacement later, we're gonna add some very easy operation. You will see. Actually, go into edit mode, scale up a little bit these faces in the UV editor, just to have more or less the size that we potentially want to see in the final result. This should be fine. Yes. Now it's finally time to have a lot of fun with this fantastic add-on, and you will see how much easier it is to work on physics and destruction with this. As always, we need to check that the origin is in the origin of the object. So object origin to geometry. Scale is 111, so it's okay. A last thing, just for safety, we're gonna give a check at the face orientation. This should not be red, should be all blue, because usually blue indicates the external faces and red indicates the internal. So what I'm gonna do is to enter in edit mode, pressing A to select all of them, and then Shift N. This fixes the normals of this object, and now it turned everything blue. So now I can turn off the face orientation and we can fracture the object. In the rbdlab menu, I can start to annotate. I want something like this, and I want to tell to rbdlab how many pieces. Then potentially I want 21. Max chunks, I'm gonna set a low number for now because I want to work fast, and we are ready to fracture it. Boop, 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 boop. It's already fractured, and we can check how it's fractured. Let's see. This is not so much detail. We didn't activate the annotation pencil, so let's start again. If you go in the explode visualization and you click on well, let's start again, it deletes everything you have done, and we can start from scratches. Now I add this option, annotation pencil. Go on the top view, start annotation, and I'm gonna draw something like this. Also, we can draw the lines down here, one from below. I'm gonna draw this here and see what happens. 300 chunks, it's okay. I'm gonna save it before fracturing and fracture. Maybe we have too many pieces, maybe not. Yeah, this is cool. Work with a low number of chunks for now because this is just a tutorial for demonstration purpose. Anyway, at the end of this I'm gonna click on clear, and we have our fracture object. Let's stay on the material view, and to give a check we can go into the explode visualization. We can stay in the material view. If you increase this amount, you can see how things are working. Maybe we can increase a little bit the size of the internal texture because it's too much small. So to do this, I just go into the shader editor here, and in the texture, make sure that we are working on the internals. If we press Ctrl T, it should appear this nodes, and we drag all of these three. You can see that we can scale the texture as much as we want. We want to scale this up. We want to make it bigger. So, and we have fixed the faces. We don't have to worry much about this now. We can click on End Explode. We can go on Object Mode now, and we can transform everything into rigid bodies. So the cool thing about this add-on is that you don't have to select anything, and you can gain a lot of time because you don't have to select stuff every time you do something. So what I'm gonna do next is to go in material view. Alright, and I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna increase the friction on 1. Collision margin, I like to set this on 0, otherwise it's gonna explode because the simulation takes distance between rigid bodies to have more stable simulation, but I don't like it. So I'm gonna set this on 0, and I'm gonna click on Add Rigid Bodies. Now, if we play the animation, everything should fall down. Add some passive rigid bodies, and to do this, we enter in object mode here, activate transparency, press C on the keyboard. We're going to select all the big shards. This light is in the middle. We can also turn off this motion tracking dots. We don't have to select unwanted stuff. So press C for the circular selection and start literally painting until you have selected all the big chunks that are outside. Okay, now we have selected all the outsiders, and what I'm gonna do is simply to go here and convert in passive. Turn off transparency, and you see if you play animation, only the middle pieces fall down. But we want now to connect all these pieces, so what you're gonna do is just to go down here and find the constraint panels, and I'm gonna set this on breakable because we want them to break, and add glue constraint. Now if I press the animation, everything stays in place. What we're gonna do is to add a helper, an object that break the connection between the rigid bodies. So I'm gonna go here and find under here there is the addon menu. You will have first to create an object that is gonna act like a helper. So I'm gonna create a sphere, and I'm gonna click on set helper. But before recording it, we have to make some animation for this. I'm gonna make it smaller. I'm gonna put it here, and I'm gonna press I, location, yeah, and then I'm gonna go here in the frame 120. I'm gonna put this here, pressing I, location, and see the movement. Let's turn off the rigid body world for now, just to see how is the movement. Okay, it's crossing the road. Maybe we can move these keyframes a little bit later in the animation. We don't want this to touch here before the frame 40. So just go in here and move it a little bit outside, like this. Press I, location, and we can click on recording. Now Blender is turning off the connection between the rigid bodies when the sphere touches them. There is a very smart function. Now let's see, we can play the animation, and now it's slower because it's simulating, and we should see some falling pieces. Next, now it's time to add a force. Make sure that the 3D cursor is exactly in the middle of this sphere. If it doesn't, you just press on your keyboard Shift S and cursor to select it, and then Shift A, adding a force, filed force. And now we're gonna connect this force to the sphere. So Ctrl P, set parent to object. I want to already increase the power of this force, so I'm gonna give a strength of 500,000 and see what happens now. If I press play, the force is pushing all the rigid bodies, but it's pushing in a very weird way. So what we're going to do is to play with the setting of the force now. So let's go in the beginning, and in the force setting we can set the maximum distance. So this is the maximum distance to which the pieces will be affected. Also, the force is too much up, so I'm gonna G, Z, put it down here, something like this. Maybe decrease the radius of the maximum distance, something like this. Can actually increase this power to 1 million, because these pieces are set on the concrete. If you see in the addon menu, so these pieces are very heavy. One of these can be 33 kilograms, so we must use a very strong force. Let's see how it works now. If I turn off this, I can clearly see what's going on. To me it's pretty good, but we can do better. Let's see. Okay, we see that the simulation stops here, even if the animation is keeping going. And that's because in the rigid body world here, cache, we need to set the end frame on the end frame of our animation, so 330. We can do a lot of things with the addon. It's very easy to decrease the strength of the glue, of the constraint, maybe something like 200, so that they will break more easily. And also, I want the force to be smaller in the radius, something like this. Yeah, there is something to say is that the force has to arrive a little bit later comparing to the sphere that is the helper. So I'm going to move the force a little bit back like this, And also I want to increase the power because it's not enough. Let's see. The cool fact about this add-on is that you, in one click, you have managed a lot of elements in the scene. You don't have to select stuff every time. If you want to work on another folder with rigid bodies, you just need to set the target on a different folder. Now we're working on this center floor shard, and so this is the folder that is written here. This saves years of time in making simulation with Blender. Anyway, to me this looks good. What we want now is to work on the shards, because if you see, our shards are too much flat, looks too much sharp. We want to add some internal details. So what we can do is a very easy trick. Just select one of these pieces and we can give him a subdivision surface modifier, setting this on simple so that it doesn't deform, maybe even 2. And another modifier that I'm gonna give to this shard, it will be the displace. I want to displace only the internal parts because the outside is gonna be flat. So what I'm gonna do is to set the vertex group here on interior. And you see that something is going on here. But we need to give him a texture, and this texture is gonna be the same texture of the rocks. So I created a new texture here that I'm calling rocks internal. I'm gonna go in the texture tab here, image, and I'm gonna load the stone 2 texture, and you see that this place is following our texture. You just need to do this on one shard, and then we can copy this to all of the other. We can play a little bit with these settings. Strength, yeah, the strength is cool, like this. We can work on the contrast of the texture. If you see too many spikes, that's because there is too much contrast in the image. Colors, I'm going to decrease the contrast. You see that it's moving out. I want to decrease the contrast, but I want to have more displacement, so I'm gonna go here and increase the strength, something like this. And now to copy these modifiers to all the others, I just need to select this collection. So I press on Shift G and I click on collection, central floor passive, and you see that I have selected all the passive rigid bodies that are around, and I press on my keyboard Ctrl L and press on copy modifiers, and you see that all the internal shards now have the displacement and the subdivision surface. But we want to copy this also to the rigid bodies active that are flying out. So what I'm gonna do is to select one of these flying pieces, and then I press Shift G on the keyboard, collection of all the active rigid bodies, so the central floor collection is good. As an active object, we need to select one of the passive that has all the modifiers, and with this active I'm gonna press Ctrl L on the keyboard and copy modifiers, and you see that we got all the internal details on this one, on these pieces that are flying. If the displacement is too much strong, you just select one of these, and then to modify all of them in once, you press on your keyboard Shift J, collection, central floor. Let's have a clear vision here. You go into the modifiers, and on your keyboard you have to hold Alt, and then you can, holding Alt, you can play with the strength of the displace modifier, and you see that we are modifying the displace for all the active rigid bodies. 0.3 looks pretty good. If I give a test render, F12, yeah, everything looks good to me. We can hide this sphere in the rendering. Select this sphere. You can turn off this so that this is not going to be visible in the rendering. I'm going to turn on the visibility of the floor and also the shadow catcher. So this and this. Click on the, not the shadow catcher, but the floor hold. Actually it's the same thing. The floor hold can be also rigid body passive, so that the pieces will bounce on it. Rigid body passive, and we're gonna click on mesh here. Surface response is okay. Sensitivity, we can set the margin of 0, just for safety. And see what happens. Cool. Let's give a test render on this one. It looks very cool to me. We can add some other things now. I want to make more lights inside here because I don't see anything. And I'm gonna play the lights something like this. Oh yeah. We have to pay attention to the borders that are always matching, so we can decrease the power. Yeah, let's see this, how it works. Okay, and now we're gonna add a hole, something in the hole inside. So go at the beginning, make sure that we are in the background collection, add in a cube, so that what we got is a box, basically an empty box. Let's stay outside with this for now. And what we want to do is to apply the scale. Control A, apply scale, and we want to unwrap this. To unwrap this, I'm gonna put some mark seam like this. Right click, mark seam, so that when you unwrap it, it will be like something smashed on a table, like when you cut a box and you put it on the table. You unwrap, and you see that this respects our shapes. I'm gonna give to this the material, maybe the same material of the rocks. Internals. Let's go in material mode. Let's go in the shader editor here, and I want this to be a little bit different, so I'm gonna make it a single user. You see this high number indicates the number of objects that use this material. I'm gonna make a copy of this material, and this is gonna be the hole. We don't need these nodes. We can actually change the texture if you want. We can put something like this. And we can also give to this a displace like in the rocks. So subdivision surface, simple. I'll set this on 3, and displace modifier. This is gonna be a new texture. I'm gonna call this hole, and going to the texture properties, I'm gonna choose our stone 2 texture. Subdivide this a bit. We see that this displacement is making only a vertical displaced because we have to set this on UV. And actually we can do the same thing on the rocks. Okay, let's fix this before. We're gonna set the strength on something like this, and I'm gonna decrease the contrast of the image so that we don't have all these spikes. Also, we can enter in the sculpt mode in order to add some variety in this hole. So I'm gonna grab, can exit the sculpt mode, and we are good to go. Actually, we can move this down. Okay, we got our hole in the floor. Now, what I want to see now is if we can fix the coordinates for the displacement of the rocks. I'm gonna select one rock, just one. I'm gonna press on keyboard Shift G, collection, central floor, and I'm gonna go into the modifiers tab. First, hold Alt on the keyboard, and then holding Alt, you press on UV here. Alright, let's see. If you want to modify all of them in the same moment, just remember to hold Alt on your keyboard, alright? Let's see, let's check if we did it for the passive also. So Shift G, collection, center floor passive, hold Alt and switch this to UV. Alright, let's press play. Yeah, this looks very good to me. Yeah, one thing that we can do is to set this hole on smooth shade. So I'm gonna press the hole, object, shade, smooth. Cool. Also, if you see that this is something wrong happening here, you can go back into sculpting mode and fix everything as much as you want. Pull and push, push and pull. Yeah, something like this. Cool. Object mode. This is a very nice hole. Okay, it's time to jump into the next step. We're gonna turn off the rendering so everything will be faster. The next step is to add particles, but the particles will not interact with the rigid bodies. If you want the particles to interact with the rigid bodies, you have to first bake all the simulation. Bake all dynamics. Now we simply expand this bake to keyframes and click on bake to keyframes. You will lose your object. Yeah, yes, do it. This will take some seconds, maybe 1 minute. Okay, now that we have converted all the rigid bodies into keyframe object, you see that if you select any of these objects, they are not anymore rigid bodies, but they have keyframes. I forgot to expand the simulation, but for now I'm gonna just finish this on 250 because I don't have time. Now, before adding particles, we need to set all of this into colliders for the particles. Go into the rbdlab addon. Make sure that is selected the right folder, that is central floor. We click on collision particles, adding collisions. We're gonna add friction for the collisions, but we need to make the colliders also for this passive. So I'm gonna change the target collection and choose the passive, central floor passive. Collision particles, add collisions. Friction on 1, yeah. So we just select the shadow catcher and we're going to set this on the physics properties. I'm going to set this on collision. Again, set this friction on 1 and randomize a little bit. You can optimize the view if everything comes lower because we have too many polygons. So you can click the hole, go on the subdivision surface and oh, this is not set on 3. We can set the level viewport on just 1 and the render on 3. Also the displays for the rocks, we can make it visible only in the render and not in the viewport. We select one rocks and then, as always, Shift G, collection. Holding Alt, we can turn off the displays here and also the subdivision. Alright, so everything will be faster. I want to see, yeah, as I was suspecting, if you notice some spikes that are coming out of the floor, select only the shards that are coming out in the beginning. So this one here, decrease the strength of this one on something like this. Also in this one, I can decrease it. And also, if you notice some distorted texturing inside some rocks, because this can happen, you can easily fix this by entering edit mode, pressing tab, and using the circular selection, selecting these faces and pressing U and wrap. This will easily fix the problem. Okay, I'm gonna add my emitter. Just ensure that you select the background collection and you add a new sphere. Scale it down, something like this. Maybe move it here, move it a little bit back to the force. I'm gonna move it down like this and push it down like this. And you can delete all these faces. Now we can apply scale. And now we can parent this to this one. Set parent to object and see if it follows. Yes, it is following. So now, if you want, you can use the rbdlab to automatically add particles and chippings, but for this particular case, I prefer to do them manually because this is a particular type of fracturing. So I'm gonna ask to the addon to help me just finding the smaller pieces. Let's find the chipping panel, that is this, and if you increase the number, oh, maybe it's selected the wrong collection target. Yes, this is the passive. We want to refer to the central floor so that now the addon knows that we are working on these pieces. As to the addon to find all the smaller parts. you see that are starting to select all the pieces, and the more you increase the number and the more you increase the selection. But we want just the smaller, just 4 and 5 like this. Usually I use this function that is all automatic, but as I said, for this tutorial I'm gonna do them manually. So I'm gonna go here and press Shift D to duplicate and move it on the side like this. Let's move them together so that they stay very close. Alright, and now I'm gonna select all of this and move them to a new collection. The new collection is gonna be the partitions. Now I need to delete the keyframes of this. So what I'm gonna do is to delete all the keyframes of all the objects at the same time. Let's press A and X and delete keyframes. Let's see. Yeah, I deleted all the keyframes in one hit. Maybe move this outside the frame just for safety. Also, a very important thing to do is to delete the modifiers that we got on the particles. We don't really need them since these particles are going to be very small in the scene. So with all this selected, I'm going to hold Alt and click on this icon and also on all these icons. I turned off the visibility in both render and viewport. And now we can activate a particles emitter. Let's see which is the frame in which the emission is going to start. With the emitter selected, I'm going to go here in the particle properties and edit a new particle system. I'm going to leave a low number of particles for now because I want to work fast. Frame start is going to be, we said 100, and it's going to be, let's see the end of the emission, 150, maybe 140. Lifetime 140, so that after 140 frames they die and they will not move like crazy, that like sometimes can happen. But we want the particles to be visible after they die. So to do this, we activate the dead option, so that now when they die, they will be still visible on the ground. You check on this one, activate this cache, so that everything will be saved on your computer. Velocity, 1 meter per second is okay. Object velocity, we can give some velocity transfer from the object to the particles. Randomization, a little bit. Rotation, we want some rotation, yes. Randomization. And also we want the particles to be dynamic. We don't need this. This is okay, we can activate this. Also decrease the mass here. Let's see here. Okay, render as, and we want to render as collection. And the collection is going to be our particles. Another important thing to do right now is to go in the file weight settings and turn off the force, because we don't want our particles to be affected by this force. Let's have a test now. We have the particles, but we actually don't see them because they are very small. So what I'm going to do is to go here on the scale option and increase it until I like it. Something like this. Also we can increase the randomness of the scales so that there will be more variety in the size. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it like that for now. Let's see how it works. Alright, if you notice that the particles keep bouncing, this is a thing that always happens with particles in Blender. What you can do is simply to select the collider ground. There is the shadow catcher, and in the stickiness option you just increase it to the maximum, that is 10. Let's see. This is fantastic. Another less mosquito in this planet. As a last note, before doing the render you have to cache the particles, otherwise the particles will be not visible in the final result in the rendering. So to do this, you select the particles, go into the cache and click on Bake All Dynamic. Caching is the process of saving all the physics calculation on the disk, so that Blender doesn't have to calculate all the physics every time. The caching is done, and now the last part will be to add the smoke. It is very easy. You just need to set in the addon the target, that is the central floor, and you go for emit from current frame, from your favorite frame. But as always, I will not do the smoke part because I hate Mantaflow and the Blender smoke system that is truly the slowest in the planet. Ambrogen for life. But if you want to do it, All you need to do is to click on Emit from current frame, and you have to add a domain. There is a cube, just add in a cube, and set this as a domain in the physics tab. So fluid, domain, and you play with these settings. That's it for today. As always, feel free to share your results with me. I'll see you next time. Ciao, ciao.